If some of you are familiar with Boston, the Blue Hill is still just outside the city around Milton area there, Dedham area. The Blue Hill is so big and very rocky. It's so rocky that the trees do not go through the rocks. So that was why it was the Great Barren Hill place. Massachusetts was the name of it, and Massachusetts were the people who lived there. So Wampanoag, we're not the only tribe over in Massachusetts. Nanopagania, we're probably not the only tribe here in this region. We were familiar with the Niantic community as well, which is also in the South County region of Rhode Island today. So our present-day border as Wampanoag is Narragansett Bay. For those of you who are familiar with that really precious, very beautiful resource that many of the tribes in this area were very eager to acquire from our local waters. This is more than just a pretty shell. It's a very unique shell. As many of you know, our environment here, our ecosystem is very unique pretty much around the world. There are other places like the West Coast, if you look at it, it's a very flat coastline, whereas we have a lot of bays here on the East Coast. And a lot of the bays in this particular area, this northeast corner of this country, will produce this nice purple rich color inside. I believe it's the vernal pools that dictate how much purple you get, how thick the shell can be. It's a hard shell, very hard shell, and we were using it to make beads, beads much smaller than these here. And they were used to basically record the stories of our people. So when pilgrims came here, pilgrims needed things from us. They were very poor. A lot of the pilgrims that landed here could not even learn how to read and write because they couldn't afford that good education. So they actually needed to pay off the rich people who paid for the Mayflower, paid for the provisions and the pigs and the cattle that came with them. They needed beaver skin from our people. Beaver was the most sought after material for the colonists. They were turning it into felt, which was the most sought after material. And this is what we wanted in return. They could not make these shell beads, so they basically introduced a glass replica, many of which are still seen today. I do have actually, I think, an example of some of that there. This is used in many forms today. The jewelry, as some of you may be familiar with. When you look at the really dark glass beads on that, those are glass replica of the actual, there are some actual wampum tube beads. Those tubular beads that are on that necklace are actually a lot bigger and broader than what I've seen in current museums. And some of you may be familiar with Burris Hill. A dig that has been going on in the area. They've found a lot of artifacts from there that are linked to this area very, very long ago. So those tubular beads, if you look at the uniformity of them, and you think, how are these guys doing this hundreds if not thousands of years ago? They didn't have power drills and sandpaper and all that stuff. So no laser drill bits to get the holes in there. They were using a pump drill method, centrifugal force on the shaft that was basically driven by your own propulsion. You would basically wind the cord up, and when you pushed it down, it would unwind. And you'd let it wind up, and you push it down, wind up, push it down, wind up, and it would just keep spinning and drilling through your shell. Once you've had enough of these bits drilled out, then you could run the entire strand of those beads through a groove in the sandstone, which I'm pretty sure if some of you go hiking in trails around Warren, Rhode Island, I'm hoping that some of you may actually find some of those old stones. If you find a stone with a groove in it, keep that in your minds when you're out there hiking the trails around here. Find a nice land. You look like you might have, you've seen one?
On top, was that way, back by the spring back there?
I'm familiar with Mount Hope and
Mount
that area, but I don't know if I've seen a rock
spring
with that groove.
By the shore side, along there?
So not near the sea, you said down by the water?
Yeah, down by King Philip's throne?
Right. I've actually walked down it.
I haven't been there in ages, but
Take a close look.
vaguely remember something.
Some of it may look aged, obviously by now. Clearly people are not using them as much as they were at one point, but you can imagine you have to make them uniform. And if everyone in the community is doing this, just so that they can give it to the chief, and the chief could then illustrate the Constitution of the United States. He could illustrate the Declaration of Independence. He could bring it out before his people. This ink will never smear. The paper will not fade and deteriorate. When you think of things like the Constitution and the Declaration, the country itself has only been there for a few hundred years. And important documents such as those are already disintegrating, fading. You cannot touch them, hold them. You definitely can't dance around wearing it like our chiefs would. So we are very proud. If you go out to the Pacific Northwest, you see totem poles. And totem poles out in the Pacific Northwest region are basically a tribe's way of saying, this is our story. This story came from here, this community. So they would build that towering depiction of the story that came from that community. It could have just been an interesting, fun little story, you know. Maybe it was a very, very important story, such as the origins, creation stories that we have as well. But this is how we used it here. In other areas like the Southwest, you'll find turquoise is common by a lot of tribes out in the Southwest. Whereas out here, this was the most, and still is the most sought after item, and it really identifies the tribes here in New England. So very unique, rich history you folks happen to be in right here. Like I said, you got one of the best ecosystems I could possibly think of. I'm a native. And we're very fortunate for us, we don't have monotonous lifestyles. Never mind driving to work every day doing the same job. No, not here. Our new year was the springtime, and when the new life returns to the land, that's an appropriate time for us to celebrate the new year, begin our planting cycle. There's 13 lunar cycles, and we do not have a 12-month calendar. We were very fortunate not to have a 12-month calendar because I'm kind of confused. You guys got like 28 days in 1 month and 31 days, and like, you got like leap years, and you got to set your clocks back or step forward. I don't know how Mother Nature's supposed to make sense of any of this, but 12 months it is, 7 days a week, whatever, 365, I don't know what it is, but no matter what, if you always look at the back of the turtle shell will only have 13 plates on it. He's agreeing because he knows this. See, a young man like this, it's just simple common sense. Simple common sense, no matter how big or how small that turtle is, what species. 13 plates on the back of the turtle. And that turtle is one of the oldest and most ancient reminders we can have about these ancient teachings. Because if it wasn't for that turtle, none of us would be here or have a place to exist and live. For those of you who are not familiar with some of our creation stories, that one could create a story, could illustrate a story that went back to a time before land itself. The native people have ancient beliefs that we were born with the land itself, that we have always consistently been here, that we were created at the very same time that the trees and the rocks and the animals and many of these things were created by the same creator, the same life giver. And that's why we kind of try and walk on an even plane with all of these beings and maintain that balance, which is the reason why we were put here. So as a native person, we have the creation stories of when there was a time that there were no people, obviously, living here. There was no land for them to live on. This entire planet, it wasn't completely made up of water at one point in time. Some of you may realize that it's still primarily made up of water, but at one point in time there was nothing but water in this planet. And there were sky people living above us in the sky world. As some scientists, they're trying to link the pyramids of Egypt, some of the pyramids down in the South American cultures as well as ways of communicating with the gods, because they believe, some of the indigenous cultures do believe that we were brought here from another galaxy maybe or something. So we're not exactly sure how you may want to view these sky people, but needless to say, there were sky people living, and that was the only place that these people could live at that time. So many of them had chores to do, just like some of us have chores to do today. Got to rip up some trees around the property, Father Sky was plucking some trees out of the ground. And just happened to take this one tree out, and the roots went so deep into the floor of the sky world that when he pulled that tree out of the ground, it actually opened up a hole to this world we live in today. A lot of sky people were curious, what's down in there? Because I can't even see the bottom. Is there a bottom? I don't even know. Hello! They didn't hear anything, they were throwing things in the hole, dropping. Didn't see or hear it hit bottom, didn't know if there was a bottom. Such a far distance between these two worlds, obviously. Now, some of these sky people, they were more curious than others, some were more rude than others. Sky Woman just happened to be both. Sky Woman started firing. Get out of my way! I want to see! When she looked into that hole, she couldn't see any more than the rest of the sky people, no matter how rude, how boastful, how loud she became. But she was so determined that she wanted to see more than the rest of the sky people. And she just kept inching closer and closer. She kept leaning in further and further. I think we all know what happened to her. She fell into that hole, took her many days' journey to fall all the way here. Boy, was she lucky. This entire planet was nothing but water. I don't think she would have survived if it was land. Fortunately for her, like I said, she survived the fall later into that water. However, having never experienced water such as that in the sky world, she immediately found out, look, I can't breathe this stuff. Gasping for air, she couldn't walk on it, she couldn't swim, she didn't even know how to doggy paddle. She was splashing about, she was all of these sea creatures, they came swimming, they heard all this commotion in the water, the crash, they heard the splashing about, they heard the screaming, all of these sea creatures, they came swimming, it's making all this noise, it's worse than a Jerry Springer episode over here. What's going on? And as soon as they pulled up, a lot of these sea creatures, they'd never seen anything like this. What is this thing? I've never seen anything like this. It's horrible. It does not know how to use its flippers very well. She was struggling to stay afloat. These animals were just as confused as she was on how to swim. They didn't know what to do. Well, we need to do something. Look at her. She needs help. Well, I don't even know. What if she wants to eat me? I don't know what this thing is. Why don't you do something? All this confusion and bickering. Next thing you know, this giant sea turtle, he arrived on the sea. He saw what was going on. He realized somebody's got to do something. And that sea turtle, he dove into that water and swam beneath it. And then he rose up to the surface. He allowed her to rest on the back of her shell. Very smart thinking of him. Now once she rested on the back of that turtle shell, that's when she was able to calm down and relax, catch her breath. That's when she started to look and see all these sea creatures that had gathered around her, staring at her. This guy. And as soon as she saw them, she pleaded with each and every one of them. She said, please, I beg of you. If any of you can swim to the bottom of this water, I promise, this dirt there, and if any of you could bring me even a small sample of dirt, I could bring many great living things to this land. Now, as soon as these sea creatures found out how they could help her, they wanted to help her. They wanted to be the one to get to the bottom of this water, find the dirt. What is the dirt? What does it look like? Let's just try and find it. They all start swimming to the bottom, you know. Got humongous whales, huge whales. Can't even fit in this room. Got ferocious sharks. But neither one of them have claws, right? It wasn't too easy for them to grab that dirt, even if they reached it. You got shellfish, like the clams, that live in the dirt. But they can't swim up to the top and give it to you. There was a lot of sea creatures that were trying that day to help us achieve their task. And when they all tried, they all failed. All but one, obviously, because we're here now. Anybody know what that animal was? Often overlooked, often considered insignificant. I'm sure many of you go your whole lives not even worried about this animal. But none of us would be here if it wasn't for this animal. Starts with an M.
Man.
No. It's got to have something to do with some water. It's not a manatee. It's not a big animal by any means. It's not a minnow. It's not a mussel. It's not a mollusk. They can't swim to the top. Muskrat. Muskrat! Some of these kids are like, what is it? I've never heard of muskrat. I think that's the most overlooked animal, I'm assuming, in the world, right? Muskrat, yes, muskrat. This little tiny muskrat with his even smaller wee little muskrat lungs. He held the lungs with whatever air he could. He he swam all the way to the bottom. He took his little tiny muskrat paw. When he got there, he filled it with as much dirt as he could, and he proudly swam all the way back to the sky, and he gave it to her. And she took that little tiny muskrat paw, filled with dirt. She carefully sprinkled it all over the back of that turtle shell. And that's what she decided what she wanted to give life to here on this land. We now call it Turtle Island. We still call it Turtle Island. She gave us all the different environments of Turtle Island. We were lucky. We got the forest and a lot of the other resources here. Some people got the cactus, you know, the desert, the prairie grass out on the prairie, all those different environments on the back of that turtle. And it was at that very same time, by that very same life kindred, that she wanted to give life to the land creatures, because she remembered how helpful those sea creatures were when she needed the help in the water. So she put the deer, the hunter, in the forest. She put the buffalo out on the prairie, and the trickster, the coyote down in the desert. All these different animals, these different environments on the back of this turtle. Then she started to miss her people. And she wanted to create something in the likeness of those that she had left behind. And that was when she decided to create us, the human beings, Annawon, the people. And she decided to create us human beings for one reason and one reason only. That was to preserve the land and to preserve the balance amongst all she created. So as a native person, that's a very, very ancient story, very important story. I think some of you guys are still in school, right? Yeah. Did you graduate already? Out in college, maybe? I don't know what you're doing in college, but you guys gotta like get up there early in the morning and say something every day, like some flag thing or something like that. Yeah? What do they call that? Pledge of Allegiance, that's right. I remember that. I was in school too. And some of us, I think, can think back, right? Didn't we all have to do that?
Yeah.
You guys still do it?
Yeah.
They've been shut down, governments and cut back on budget. Have they cut back on patriotism in your school? Because some schools that I visit, they do it whenever, once a week. How often do you do it? Once a day? Every day? Oh, that's how most of us, I think, were raised. Had to do it every day, had to stand up. Now they have freedom of religion acts. I think you actually get a choice whether you want to rise or not, or repeat the words. But when we were younger, you know, you had to stand, you had to repeat these words, you had to face that flag and say it in a certain way. Because they want you to understand what these colors and symbols and freedoms and democracies represent. And that's why it's repeated over and over and over. I'm sure some of you think, oh, man, I already know this story. Well, some of these stories I can't tell enough. If any of you have been to some of my previous events here at the festival, you probably may have heard of that particular story. But it's a very, very important story. It teaches us that muskrats can achieve things that huge whales and ferocious sharks cannot. We have learned that a lot of life came from that little sprinkle of dirt and that little paw of his. We learned a lot. We learned a lot about taking care of this land, this turtle that is alive. It's a living, breathing thing. We believe safe people. We believe everything that's living in this world is our relative. Everything has a life. I can't be a vegetarian because I'm still killing plants. When I'm killing something, I give thanks and I'm thankful. And that's why we don't wait until this late November to give thanks for all that we've been enjoying all year long. So, like I said, New Year's, springtime, strawberries, those are ripe pretty early in June. That's when you have the strawberry Thanksgiving. Any of you who would like to participate in some of these native Thanksgivings that still continue to this day, head on over to the Plum Plantation around the time of the strawberry harvest with your families. It's a great time, actually. We get together. I'd be in my tribal dress. I've disappointed anybody today, but it is important to remind you this is what you're going to get today from native folks. You know, like, maybe we won't live this down. Set of generations. We always, as native people, that creation story I share is to preserve the land for these next generations. There's 7 that have not even been born that will need to inherit this land, and that's why we try to protect the land like we do. So 7 sticks. One team has to get all 7 sticks, and then you will win a prize, okay? So, I'm going to be passing out these sticks. If you get 3 or 2 combinations, you get 1 stick, and you'll get to go again. If you get a combination of 4 and only 1 opposite, you're going to lose your turn and it's going to go to the other team, okay? If you get all 5 of the same color, you're going to shout, yeah! Next one, you get 2 sticks. This game will go pretty quick if we get those. This combination has something to see on the light side. How about we go right down the line? We'll start there, we'll work right down the line. Shake it 3 times and how would you do? Combination 3 and 2! Now you got a stick. You can pass that right on to your teammate. How about there? 3 and 2! He has a double point. Keep that momentum All right, I can hear him moving around, but it's still a 4-1. Whoa! Let's try it a little easier there. Up, up, up. 3 and 2. Goes to her. Let's keep that momentum. Whoa, we're just putting this try. Good score, good score. How many of you guys got? 3? You got 2? She got 2? Right? Well, you know that Roger Williams, I know I said we're doing all this noise. Obviously the bowl was noisy, the hub, the shouting was noisy. When Roger Williams heard all of this, he came and found this arbor with these people playing. And he walked up and he said, "What's all the hubbub?" And when they explained his game, he asked, "Why are they hitting each other?"
No, he's on that
It was pretty good. Exactly. They're still getting points. They're probably yours. There's some fighting, some smiting. Let's everybody try some smiting, baby. 3 and 2. 1 stick down, 1 to go. What do you guys got to give up one of those sticks? You were the first to earn it, so I think that's the first one. There you go. You got your stick down for your team. You guys are winning here. You guys need to make some pronouns. That smiting didn't work for you. Up, up, up. 4 and 1. You guys are still in there. Right ahead. 3 and 2. We got a stick back. Can we take one of yours? 3 and 2. Another stick. You got 2 sticks. Whoa. 4 and 1. Who's going to win it? 3 and 2. 1 stick down, 2 to go. Those of you who are sticking around, we'll be doing some cornhusk action figures that hopefully everyone will get to walk away with as soon as we're done with this game here. 4 and 1.